Hey, hello everyone. Welcome to Low Code Campfire number 19. So I'm going to say hello here. It is our topic today. We actually have a guest presenter per request from last week. And so David Osborn is going to be covering if then else here in a few minutes. But Low Code Campfire is a place where we come together and just discuss low code in general, plant an app in specific. It's a weekly event. It happens every Friday, and this is open to all skill levels. We will entertain questions and discussion, whether it's very deep or just getting started. We have recorded all the past editions, so we have 18 hours of low-code campfire, and that's available on our YouTube channel. You're welcome to grab that. QR code will get you right to it. We have a pretty simple agenda. We say hi and then talk about what's going on, new techniques, challenges, your experiences with the code. And it's very informal. This is meeting format, so jump in, say hi, ask questions. Only one rule, try and mute if you've got some information, got some noise behind you. We have a form for inputting questions and topics. And so in addition to being able to use this, that's a Google form where you can submit that. And then we also have, you can shoot me an email, and we've got a couple of them going on this week where people have shot me an email. So this looks like a very familiar group. I don't know, Jeff, it's been a while since you've said hello on, I don't know if you've been on Campfire before, but welcome. Everyone else is a regular. Not irregular, that are regulars. There we go.
Thank you. It's good to be here. It's my first campfire, so I'm pulling out the marshmallows.
Excellent, excellent. Yeah, when I got Campfire started, I asked and got we have some great graphics people that put that together, because I'm very black and white and linear, so we need people that can think outside the box. Put that together. Okay. So we are, I will mention, we continue to ask for reviews. I know some of you on here have done reviews, but that's Capterra reviews. And if you have a chance, we'd love to get that. The link was also in your invitation email, I think. So first call, what's on your mind? What's going on this week? Anybody with a burning question? Well, if not, I think we're going to start with our if then else, the question of the day. And I will tell you what, when we get past that, I have because of some of the questions that have come my way this week, I have some answers, and just got off the phone with Radu. It's always great to be able to have a Radu to ask questions and say, how do you do this? And he's like, oh man, yeah, you could do that. It's kind of, I already had the power to do it. I just didn't understand how. So I learned something new today, and I hope to pass that on as well. So David, good morning. David Osborn is a developer. I've worked with him for, I don't know, more than a dozen years. And he's working for one of my clients from my previous work experience, and that's actually Jeff. So now that secret's out. But he's working with Jeff and decided that he wanted to learn how to extend the platform, and then did it. So Jeff, David, if you want to say hi and tell us, did I have that story right? That's why you did it? You were kind of curious about the platform?
Yeah, to some extent. I mean, I was curious about the platform. I always like to dig in. I should ask, can you hear me all right, Dale?
Yep.
Perfect. And so I am a software developer by trade. I got a degree in computer science from Iowa State, who just lost a big football game here this past weekend, if anyone cares. But I think about things, from a developer standpoint then. And so I did the if then else action, because that's how a developer thinks about it, right? There's a way to handle the solution right now with the plan and app actions, right? There's no way you can't do what I already did in a different way, but that's the way I thought about it. And it was actually very simple. And so it was a good jumping off point into creating custom actions. And there is a documentation page on that, on the Plantain app site and the help documentations. That's basic. That gets you started on it along with a sample application. And so it was a good starting point. The one thing I don't say I get frustrated with, but I get when I want to do a specific task. Sometimes when I'm doing actions, it takes 5 or 6 actions, and you can do it with Plantain app. But sometimes it's just easier to write your own thing, especially when you have the developer mentality and you're like, well, I just want to make a web request, grab the JSON that I want and do something with it. And you can do that with the Plantain app actions, and you can do it in maybe 2 or 3 different actions. But if you want to handle some extra error handling or something like that, then it gets more complex. So as a developer, it's nice to be able to jump in. And I was actually really, really impressed. I've built 2 different workflow systems for different things. And the way that the developers at Plantain app have made it so you can extend it, I'm actually surprised, because I've ran into other systems before that aren't as easy to extend. So they've done a really good job, and I'm not just blowing smoke trying to impress, the Plantain app people. As a developer, I'm really happy about the way they've done it. It works out really well.
And just to kind of tag on to that, so even though I have a developer background, I tend to stay inside the box instead of extending the box. And so I know exactly what you're talking about. The actions that are built into Plantain app can be used such that you can accomplish the same thing. Sometimes it takes more steps. Building a custom action, it's like you can do it all in one. And so it just depends on your viewpoint and your skill set. You can use it as low code, or you can dig in deeper. And there's no question there's a good ability for somebody who's technical to extend the platform. It's built in. So what's the start? You want to show us what it looks like?
Do you want to let me share, and I can show you what's going on, how it works?
You should be able to, let me know if you cannot. Working.
Okay, so first up, here's the Plantain app documentation screen. So they do have a page of documentation on this of how you do things in Visual Studio, and they've even got a sample application that you can download there at the bottom. And so that's what I initially got my start off of when I found that. But I've set up a really basic test form, and like I said, you can use this action in automations. You can use it in a form, you could use it in a workflow, but this one I put no here standard. This is the regular way that I would have done. So I have a form here, and if I put in David and click not that, if I click submit, I'm going to get hello David, right? Something very basic. But if I put in Dale, I'm going to get, I don't know you, right? So there's some logic going on there to look at the name, like I said, really basic, and put up a different message. And so if I go to the form implementation, and like I said before, this is the standard way that would just happen. So
hey,
I've got an execute.
I'm sorry. Sorry for interrupting. Would you scale your screen up a bit?
I can attempt to. Is there a way to do that in Zoom, or do I just need to?
You might be able to Control plus depending on the browser. Just the browser might magnify.
Yeah, just a browser would do it. I use Control Scroll.
Yeah, there you go. That might do it.
Let's see how far we can get it up here.
So
You must have good eyes, David.
I have really big monitors because I have bad eyes sometimes. How's
That's
that?
great. Yeah, thank you
Excellent.
so much.
Okay. So let's find my spot. Okay. So like I was saying, this is just the normal way of doing it. So I've got an execute actions here. That's got a check on it, right? And it checks my token name, that is name, that's coming off that form, looks to see if it's David. And if so, the actions are, it updates a token of custom message with hello name. And then down below, after my other execute actions, we're doing our Ajax update. And then, so that handles the if side of things, right? And then there's another execute actions here that handles all the other people, right? If my token is not David, then we do an inject data. We do I don't know you, and then the same Ajax form update at the bottom happens. That's what's handling the if else scenario in just the standard actions. So I've got another form here. This one's going to look exactly the same, except for it says if else action here at the beginning. And if I click submit, we get hello David if it's David. And if I do Dale this time, and I click submit, and it says I don't know you. So the functionality is exactly the same as the previous form. But if I go into the implementation of this, instead of having the two execute actions on here, I've got the if else action here. So
David,
the description.
Same thing. Can you zoom that?
Oh, sorry, it didn't apply to this one, huh?
While he's doing that, I'll just mention he showed the documentation for custom actions, and I've put that on the clipboard, and it will be in the comments to the video as well.
Okay, so here's that if else. Works the same here. We got a description here, check who is. We have the regular condition field. I had hoped that I could hijack this for my if condition, but that's at a higher level. So there's the one error problem I fall into with using my custom action is sometimes I'll throw my if condition into this field and wonder why my stuff isn't working. But that is just the standard action condition that prevents this action from executing. So there's a new property on mine called if condition. And it's got my token equals David, right? And then I've got two groupings of actions here. I've got the if action. So if it's true, I do an inject data, which is my same inject data that I showed you in the other form actions, which just sets the hello name custom message. And then there is another branch, which is else actions, has another inject that just does my unknown message. So that's the main two pieces. So it's basically taking those two execute actions, putting them into one action and allowing my developer brain to think of it as an if else statement. There's also an on error condition on here as well. And so if the action errors, it can execute some of these tasks. And I think I wasn't in last week's Campfire, but I watched that. And someone, maybe it was Mark, was asking about error conditions and handling complex errors. And always having to key off of this workflow. Well, my action here and some of the PlantNap actions, I believe, have this on error thing. And if you put actions in here, those execute when it errors, but then the workflow still keeps going, if I recall from when I originally set this up. And so from a user interface standpoint, even from a code standpoint, which what I can show you, it's not complicated. And it doesn't do anything that the existing system can't do. It just handles it in one task as opposed to doing it to two separate actions. Does that make sense? Does anyone have any questions on that?
I do. I have a question.
Please.
Sure.
So if you could scroll up a little bit, so you implemented that if condition as a different type of action that's in your form. So you pick if else as a condition. Is that how that got? Or was this added into?
You're cutting out. Is that on my end or is that on your end? Probably on my end.
Probably on my end. You added that as a type of action or a part of?
Yeah. So okay, let me show you how that gets added in. So that is a type of action. So let me minimize some stuff here. Oh, here's my submit button. You get to my action list. So this is now added in, and I can show you how that gets added in. I scroll down all the way at the bottom almost. I've got my category here, and there's my if else thing. So this is an actual action added into the system. From a user endpoint standpoint, it looks exactly the same as all the other things that are in the system. Does that answer your question?
It does. Thank you.
And so that by the way, the place that you put it within PlantNap, you have this action is available throughout the product, right? So it's available through automations. It's also, I've got the let's see,
here's the workflow screen. And so I was going to point out on that. So you can do add action there. Let me increase my screen size again. And it's in here as well. But I wanted to point out it doesn't, in here, it doesn't function how I would want it to function, right? So there's no like branch in the system. So you're not going to get like an if branch and an else branch arrow coming down. It works as it would work in automation. It's going to execute its if conditions or execute its else actions, and then it's going to follow, you know, the same arrow through this workflow. So it doesn't mentally work how me as a developer would want it to work in this workflow of having two separate arrows that go off, one for the else branch, one for the if branch. So that's why I pulled up the workflow window here to point out it's not mentally going to work the way you're probably going to want it to in the workflows.
But it does, it's working the exact same way as it does elsewhere. And because you can put actions inside of actions, you could have nested if else. You could have a great deal of complexity, whether that's good or bad, but you could have a great deal of complexity hidden in one if else block that has several branches. So you've already got a question. Jeff asks, could this be tweaked to be a case statement instead of an if else, two paths?
I've thought about that. I was actually thinking about this past week after Dale had contacted me and asked me if I'd present, because that would be interesting. And I was thinking about trying it, but you know, with a case statement, you've got a variable number of case statements. So the way I picture that is you would need a variable amount of, you know, else action blocks going through the thing. And I'm not sure it's possible. I think maybe it's possible because I know there's some more complexities and ways to define that UI, and there's some array elements. So you might be able to do it, but I haven't dug in. It's going to be way more complex, I know, than the if else statement. And the engineer part of me wants to dig into it and figure out how to do it. The data for kids and lots of busy work warrants that I may not be digging into that too quickly. But
can't just go play just because you want to.
Yes, not anymore.
So this, you said this is pretty straightforward. Do you have code that you can show how you implement?
Yeah. Let me pull up the code, and I can show you configuring it and adding it into your system is extremely easy as well too. So let me show that first. So when you create a custom action, you're going to need two things. You're going to need the DLL that Visual Studio makes. And that just gets dropped into your bin folder of your Plantain app application. So right here is my DLL. It gets dropped in there. The second piece is a JSON config file, which in this case, in the case of Plantain app, is called custom actions config.json.config. And so that just gets dropped in there. And then the system just picks it up as long as you've done everything right. So the only thing you want to do is I mean, in most cases, you shouldn't already have a custom action config, but if for some reason you do, if you override it, you're going to mess up the config options that were already there. But from my understanding, a default system isn't going to have that because it's specific to our custom actions.
I'm pretty certain that you can
screen size here in Visual Studio.
Please. I'm pretty certain that you can name that.
So this is going to be very similar to the sample because this if else is not too complicated. You need to add references to dnnsharp.common, and I think it's dnnsharp.common2, I believe, are the two DLLs you had actions to. But then it's all based on implementing this iAction IMPL interface. And so this is C# here for people who aren't familiar with it. We've got an if condition string. So this is a string. This corresponds to that property on the user interface that is the if condition. We have some attributes on the top here. Apply tokens. I believe is basically just telling the system that if someone puts a token in this string input field in the user interface, translate that token before you give me the property to use in the code. We've got an is required here, so set it to true if you want the user interface to do that. We've got a required message. Those are the main things. Then we've got the 2 or the 3 other screen parameters, which are those event action collections. So we got the if actions, we have the else actions, and we have the on error actions. And so there's two methods that you need to implement in this class. One is the execute method that runs everything. And then if you scroll down below, there's also an init method, which I'm not doing anything in, but if you wanted to initialize up anything, you could do that. So I'm basically taking the if condition variable here, putting it into a string. So whatever the user's inputted as the if condition. And then I use this method that PlantinApp has called apply all tokens as Boolean. So it takes that string, translates, the tokens that are in there, which should already be translated because that apply tokens is equal to true, but it still executes it and returns me back a Boolean variable. So it's either going to be true or false, which if true, then I first check to make sure that the person's actually populated some if actions so that it actually has actions in that collection. And if they haven't, I return nothing because it's not really a valid state. And then if so, I just execute those actions and return whatever they're returning, right? And then there's the same case for the else statement. I check that there's else actions. And if there's not, or if there is, I execute those actions. And then the whole thing is wrapped around a try catch. And if there isn't any errors, it throws an exception and just lets the PlantinApp workflow engine handle the error and does nothing else. If there are an on-error actions defined, I take the exception string and I throw that into a token called server.error message. So this is a good example on how you can, send data back up to your workflow to be used later on. So the intent here is I have logging error, so when my on error happens, I log these messages to the log so that it's there. And then I execute. So that's what happens on the on execute actions here. So it throws this up there into the memory so that you know what happened, and then it will execute those on error actions, which in this case you can log that message. And that is really it. There's one difference that I'll point out between using the execute actions that's built into the system and condition on that and using my if statement. It's probably something I could get around, but I haven't spent the time to dig into it. If you pop open the standard method and we look on the condition on it, our name token here does not have single quotes around it. If you go to mine, let's see if I can find it now. The name token needs to have single quotes around that because it resolves it to, I assume, essentially a C# code and executes it. And so in order to be valid, so you'll run into issues here if name is a null value because it'll throw quotes around it and it's probably not going to work. I tend to handle the null values before it gets to my if condition, so I don't have to worry about it. So there are some small gotchas with this that PlantinApp developers have handled on their own, and I haven't invested the time to do that. But overall, I mean, I like how it's set up, and it helps my mind think through things and allows me to. It's kind of nice from going through and understanding what's going on. Instead of having two groups, based on opposite, if statements. There's just that one, and so mentally that structures it better for me when I'm trying to support through my old workflow action things to decide what's going on with them. And like I said, I built this for a client who said it was fine to go ahead and share that, and this was the basic kind of kicking off point for some actions, and then I ended up making various other actions, a handful of other ones for making JSON type calls to web services so that I could, grab the data and parse it all in once and potentially, structure the data how I wanted to before sending it outside of the action. Anyone have any questions on this?
While they're thinking of questions, I have a statement. I think I'm correct. The custom action config template that you put in there, if you can, it doesn't have to be named custom action or whatever it is that you had. It could be named if else.
Okay, I did not know.
Just so long as the naming doesn't conflict with our naming, we're going to pick up everything that's in that folder. So long
awesome.
As
okay.
File. So then you don't have to worry about collisions so much.
Awesome. I did not realize that, but that makes sense that it's probably was just named custom action because I think that's what the Visual
Example.
Studio solution is. Yep. You know what? I didn't even play into that and investigate that at all. So that makes it even easier because then there's not going to be any conflicts. And then I did. Dale brings up a good point because I didn't go over the config file. So that's the other thing you need. It's fairly basic, but it could potentially get semi-complex depending on what you're doing for your user interface. But this is basically, from my understanding, defining what your user interface structure is and wiring that up to your code. And so like right at the top, it was the main thing that's going to wire it up to your code, which is the namespace and the assembly name for your code that you're working with. And then there's that setting name. It's our group name. So that's what decides, what group it goes under in your UI configuration. And then it is a array list of parameters here. So we've got our if condition, the actual display name of that, some help text to put up on the screen, and the type of user input that it's going to be. And then the other three are all the same. We got your if actions, the title that it's going to be on the screen, your help text, and then that type is an action list. And look, you get some more advanced default values you can put in there in settings. A lot of that stuff I haven't dug into entirely, but I do think it makes it a lot more powerful. There's a lot of configuration that you can do there once you dig in and completely follow what's going on.
Great. So anyone with questions? Anyone else with questions?
I have a question on when you were building this. This one's pretty straightforward, but maybe in some of your more complex extensions, are you able to test it without it? If it's not working with your plant and app hooks into things, are you able to test it through Visual Studio in any way to make sure it's working before you got there?
I think so. Okay, don't quote me on this, but I believe back when I was building this, I was able to hit a Visual Studio breakpoint and it picked it up. Oh, I feel like this is one of these statements that I could be completely wrong. It's Friday and my brain's starting to get worn out, but I think I may be wrong. You know what? I'm not going to answer that with 100% certainty. I'm sure there's a way to do it, and I can't remember if I did or not. I'm going to retract my statement because I'm looking at my code and I did have some context logging stuff that I put in here. And so I'm guessing I was not debugging and that I was just dumping stuff out in the log. I've done that with other stuff. So I'm guessing if you attach to the right worker process with Visual Studio and have your breakpoints in here, and I'm not sure if I did that or not, I'm sure you're actually able to debug it. It's just a matter of finding the right IAS worker process that things are running under and doing the attachment. And I'm seeing some head shaking yes here, so I'm thinking I'm correct. The guy who's running the show is shaking his head yes, so I think I'm good. I think my answer's right.
You can attach to the process and debug for sure, but also sometimes it's better also to build a business logic in a separate DLL that you can also do a lot of unit testing, debug it separately, and this is just where you plug the custom code to action form, for example, to the action. But normally, this is a simple action, so it doesn't have a lot of business logic. But normally, when you do have a lot of business logic, you end up having a separate test system anyways.
Yeah. Don't judge my coding skills based on this one alone. If it was a bigger project, there would be unit tests and that sort of thing too. Yeah.
Great. Anything else for Mr. David?
It looks good, Dave. It looks very good.
Yeah, that was good. I guess this is for Bogdan. Is there maybe this is kind of a future thing for the academy or training or even a Friday focus, developer tips, how to set up your environment for kind of the newer folks like myself, but the hacks, wannabes. How do you set up your environment and, do the break codes and kind of do testing to, kind of do a little bit of training on the system itself for developers?
Yeah. I think there are a couple of resources, not enough, I agree, but I think there are a couple of resources. Even recent one, I think Robert did something in a local cafe a couple of months ago, but in the DNN Sharp YouTube channel, I think there are some old videos, like 1 hour long each, where I demonstrated all the integrations that you can do in the DNN Sharp products.
And those are still applicable today, Bogdan?
Most of them, yes.
Okay.
Like exactly like this way of extending actions. I think we have around 20 or 30 such interfaces that you can extend. For example, you can create new token types from code, or you can create new search boost data sources from code.
Got it.
You can create new validators from code. You can extend it in 20, 30 ways with the same technique that David showed us.
Perfect. I'll watch those and play and then come back next Friday with my questions.
Very good.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah, and we have in the Low Code Cafe, we have done, it's been quite a few episodes ago, but we've done some extending demonstrations as well. So there's some recent ones, some older ones, but all they're out there on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/plantandapp. Okay, thank you, David. I'm going to share back here.
Thank you, David.
And that's the wrong screen. So let's see, we had a couple of other things. And I think Matthew, I think I saw that you were on. Yep, you're on here. Matthew Croshaw had some question about how can we make Campfire be of more value, and he had a lot of quite a bit of detail, and I appreciate the thought that went into that. And so I just thought I would open that up as a general topic. We spend this hour together, so it's a little bit random, and I kind of approached it where I don't prepare very much. I try to have some answers to your questions, but this is not as structured as the cafes, just so that we can get into discussions. But any thoughts about how we could make it be better? And Matthew, if you're inclined to say kind of what you had in mind and get the conversation started, that would be great. I don't want to put you on the spot.
It's okay.
But I did.
I opened my big mouth to begin with, so I'll continue. So first of all, I think that the campfires and the Low Code Cafe are awesome. They really are. Where I was coming from was slightly a different perspective, and just trying to think, how can this campfire, and maybe I'm barking up the wrong tree, but how can the campfire become more broadly applicable to your larger audience or your larger potential audience of folks that are new users? And so my kind of the basic suggestion was think about doing some of the meat and potatoes sort of approaches to things, using, for example, the help desk ticketing system as a metaphor to build out, okay, if we want to do this with a ticketing system, we use action grid and we, change it up this way. Maybe we create a custom template, things like that, so that it is it's an extension of the excellent academy that exists already, and then B, as a user, they can. I'm thinking again, more new users or relatively new users, that they can quickly dive in, get some answers on kind of the more mundane things, and then be productive and move on. That was the general thought. I had some specific ideas, many of which probably are worthless. However, one or two might be okay.
So your question got me to thinking, and another thing I'll just kind of throw out as a possibility is that I wonder whether we could take on doing some kind of a system or maybe some subsystems and just kind of advance it a little bit every week. And so if you start from scratch and you do piece by piece, that we start seeing builds up a library. It ends up being a resource. And it's almost I'm almost inclined to say, well, what else could we do besides a ticketing system, just so that we don't so that we kind of expand a little bit. And if there was some way to do that as a group, I mean, we've been doing some collaborative things here in this. Sometimes the answers to the questions are better because we're a group. So it'd be interesting to see if we could collaborate on building up a system. And then one kind of side note from that is that we want to make workflows be shareable, make more and more content shareable side to side. So if there are things that that we need for that you need for development, why don't we put our heads together and focus on, okay, we're going to build a workflow that does this common thing, whether it's logging or computation or whatever, that we just start to build the library. It helps us as we go. So anyway, those were my add-ons to your good idea.
Good. Yeah, another thought that I had was, and again, I may be, this may be redundant again, is that some of the stuff that you've done in the Campfire that you have as examples, and they're very good. If there's an opportunity for somebody to go out and actually look at, as a low-code developer, let's say, look at what you've done, actions, and just export actions right from your the work that's been done in things like this, and then import them and tweak them from there. I think I'm just looking at time savings.
Sure.
There's a lot of things to be learned. Time savings, how quickly can you get, from my perspective, how quickly can I get to market, if you would, with what I'm trying to do? That's probably pretty selfish, but maybe other people might be in that same view, same boat.
So I haven't seen this before, but Mark actually raised his hand. So what do you, what's your thought, Mark?
I'm actually thinking along the same lines. Matthew saying how quick can you get to market? I would second idea say, how quickly can I understand each piece that you did? So if I could log in as the developer to see what token you used and how the syntax was worded, then that would be excellent for learning. Yeah. So it's great to see a project that is working. From my perspective, I'd also like to see, how did you get that done? How did you build that?
Yeah.
And opportunities for me to actually grab pieces would be excellent.
Yeah, I think, I'm not sure when it mentioned, but some of the things I think were being thought of to be put in the quote unquote product at some point was more proof of concept things, initial starting points, similar to like the action form. You can select this type of form, that type of form. That's the sort of thing that I think would be broadly applicable to your audience and enable a fair amount of get people traction pretty quickly, I think.
Bogdan, my understanding is we're doing some efforts. We're kind of headed that way in some ways. Do you want to speak to that at all, or is it too early?
The major goal for the current release is to have application templates. So basically to be able to start from a template, and then that's exactly the purpose, for people to see how it was built. So that's a great step forward for us in this direction. It's not the ultimate step, it's just a first step, because ultimately we do want to have like a marketplace where people can publish workflows, download workflows, like a repository, not necessarily a marketplace. So I think that's when things will really scale up.
But it would be interesting, for example, if Campfire had a project that could be the source of a template. So all the things that we're talking about at any point, wherever it is, somebody could grab a copy of it. We could just leave it out as published. That might be a way to put that into use and cover what you were just talking about.
Yeah, definitely.
An idea. maybe before that's ready, or maybe in addition to it somehow. But I know that you're putting all your examples online, Dale. Wonder if something like that could be available where we could log into it. Then obviously we'd be able to see how you did things. I'm sure there would be a concern that it would get messed up over time, but if you had a process like a backup and restore thing, just restore it every night or something like that. If one of us screwed it up, it could just be restored. It's just a thought.
Yeah, no, I would be open to that. We have the ability to create these instances that we could have one that's in common, it's isolated, and if somebody messed it up, it's just a question of how do we, what are we going to do with that? But it's a little. I don't think we're very far from being able to do something like that.
Another thing that you did, Dale, with one of your, and I think it was Campfire, you actually took and exported the module itself. And so you saw the example, then you grab the module export, do an import, and then do a side-by-side comparison, for example. That sort of thing, as maybe even an interim before you get if you do go in that direction, this whole kind of backup restore thing set up. As an interim, maybe it's just as simple as exporting the module content so somebody could take a look at it on their system.
Yep. Actually, our first stage in this, and this is homework that I gave to our delivery team, is to do a GitHub repository where they put these things that they reuse or tricks, hacks that they commonly use across system. So then it's not something functional like Mark would want, so you log in and see all these cases, but at least it's a collection, it's a repository with many different solutions that you can import into a setup. So that's something that probably we'll have in place in the coming weeks.
That sounds great, Mark.
Yeah, and of course it will be a public repository, so anyone can look at it, anyone can create pull requests to get their own samples in.
That would be great.
Sounds good.
Okay, good talk. We will head in that direction. I'm going to go on to a couple more things. We had a particular question about how to use this is from Anthony, by the way, how to use the output of a workflow in a Razor script for each. And can we use output data as you would with a database token? So this is what I was checking with Radu right before the call. I want to make sure I had it right. Workflows output simple text. They don't output typed things. So for example, you can't do a SQL call, a run SQL action and output a token, which can then be output from a workflow. It's going to, you can output a value from a SQL action, but you can't actually output the whole token as if you had a database token. So, but Radu showed me, and this is what I learned. I was certain that you could output JSON, and that would be very easy to consume within a Razor script. So if you could use a workflow that returned an entity, for example, and then put JSON back to the as the output, which you can then consume from other, whether it's a Razor token or other purpose. So that answers the question. Does anybody have that problem, and do we have any interest in seeing it, or does that make just enough sense as I put it?
Selfishly, yeah. This is Craig to see that, just see how you can grab that output real fast. Sure.
So this is another opportunity to just test and make sure that we do things live here, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But this is the one that I was trying to do, and I came to a hack way of doing it, and so I'm now going to come to a real way of doing it. So if we want, for example, I'm going to use the users as a SQL statement. So if we do a SQL run query and do select star from users, and we'll put this in as a result, for example, and then output result here. If we do this, just save and test that, we get one output, the users. It's the last user it's the user ID of the last user in that set. So the question is, how do you turn that whole thing into JSON? And I didn't understand. It's kind of one of those that it's already there, and you just got to understand how to use it. So if you create a JSON object, and so we're going to create, I'm just going to call it JS here for simplicity, but the way to do it is to create, is the output that we're going to say, for example, is all data, and the value is going to be coming from result. So it's going to take result and put it into something called all data, and it's going to be an entity list. And that should be it. So that if we then go to our output and add JS as an output, with any luck, this will work. No. Failed to create JSON. Okay, and maybe. So this is outputting result. And maybe this needs to be a that way. I'm not certain. So Radu showed it to me, and JSON all data could not find.
That's all right. Yeah, I kind of get.
Oh, no. I almost have it. I have it here. This is nope. I'll find it, and so none of this will be a challenge I'm going to take on for next week.
No worries.
So watch me. This is as interesting as anything. While we've been talking on the chat, David has put the. Feel free to download the DLL if anybody wants to play with it. So that's on the chat, and I'm going to make sure I capture that for our links for when we do the video. And so, Anthony, I will get you the answer to how to output that JSON, but that's the recommendation. And the last thing, this is purely selfish. I ran out of time on in the cafe, to demonstrate the end of the artwork shopping cart, and I have it here now to show. So I'm going to do that real quick. And so I want to make sure I'm logged in here. So we have our demonstration app. We can go to locations, and actually I'm going to go to the cart, and we see that the cart is, we have one item in the cart. I'm going to delete that. So I added an edit functionality and a delete item functionality. So the cart is empty. We look at the database behind at the Lantern app system. This is our shopping cart table. So we have just this one test record in there. But if we go now and start picking items, like we add this Picasso to our cart and change the quantity from 1 to 5, so we have this in our cart. And if we look in the database, we have it here. So it's interacting. The cart is getting its content from our API. When we put something in the cart, it's pushing it to the API. So it's all working from database on Plantain app, and you can manipulate the cart. So the next step will be something like, adding a pay logic to it. But ran out of time to show that the other day. Wanted to make sure that I could close a loop on that, because I don't think we're coming back to Adalo anytime soon. But it has been a good demonstration.
That looks good, Dale.
Yeah, it was a huge help. Yeah, that was fantastic.
Great. Well, I'm glad there was interest in it, because I had fun, right? And that's the main thing, that I have fun.
Well, yeah.
So we're at 10 minutes left. What else? Somebody brought something new, or question or something we can deal with today.
Well, hey, I realize I'm a repeat offender in this category, so I was waiting for someone else to speak up. But I do have it's a silly question. I feel like I should know how to do this, but let me just throw it out there. Maybe someone just make a quick comment and then set me on the right way. But I have an action form. I'm displaying the results in an action grid, and I set up the button to edit a record from the action grid in the action form. I want the action form to pop up when someone hits the edit button. I got all that to work, but I want to hide the action form on that page unless it is clicked to open as a pop-up. I haven't been able to hide the form. If I hide it, then it doesn't pop up anymore. So if someone says, well, yeah, you got to put the right thing here, then that might be all I need. Who's done this before? I feel like I've done it before. It's not working this time.
Isn't that the manual setting of the pop-up form?
Yeah, that would work if I called it from code, but I want to pass it the entry GUID so that it can edit the item from the action grid, from the action form. And I don't know how to get the entry ID unless I let it pass it automatically. Maybe there's a way to get the entry ID.
Well, so, I mean, I'm just looking at how we do it. The form doesn't show here until you click the button. It's set in display mode manual. So you're doing that?
No, I have tried that, but I need to open the action form with the entry ID as a query string parameter. And if I do it that way, like you're pointing now, then I need to know what the entry ID is. And I don't know how to get that. But the action grid will just supply it for me if instead of opening it manually, if it opens as one of the built-in special buttons.
Is the button on the grid to open?
Yeah, but the button is on the grid and it produces the entry ID automatically.
Because you can pass a query string parameter from that button, the very last thing to pass query string to the pop-up.
Right.
And I would do it that way if I could get the entry ID.
Oh, so the entry ID is not in the grid?
It is not in the grid.
Ah.
When I look in the tables behind the scenes, I can't find it. I don't know how it's being produced or where it's being stored.
Got it.
What's your source of that ID to, how will you ever know if you don't have it in the grid or someplace else? Where are you hoping to get it from?
That actually is the question. If I could find that entry ID, I'm not producing it. Action form produces it.
So you're using action form as a data source. You're using
it's the data source, and I also want to use it as the edit mechanism.
And to use scope ID, pass the scope ID. Once it goes in, you can grab the scope ID. Trying to remember how I did that.
If you're in action form and you're gonna, let's say, send yourself an email when the form is submitted, you can put the token in there, which is edit URL. If you put that token in there, then you receive an entry ID that you can then use to reopen. It's a URL that will reopen the form with the data in it, which is essentially what I want to do. I want to edit that data. But I can only get that at submit. I haven't been able to store it. I tried to store it as a entry, as a field in the form, but it doesn't show up in the report. So I don't know if I knew where to get that entry ID, I would use it.
So I feel like I have something that I can find for that. I don't have it off the top of my head.
This seems like a silly, stupid thing because I'm pretty sure the way I remember it, it used to be, unless I'm just totally wrong, if you put a form on the same page as the grid, and then you choose the form to be the target of your edit button, I thought it would hide the form. Maybe I'm just thinking wrong or remembering the wrong thing. Yeah, if you're looking for an idea, I just have two fields, the title and content, and I store that. I'm making a fact module, frequently asked questions.
We'll do it your way.
It's simple. Yeah, it would work since you're trying to do it fast.
This needs to be saved to report, right? That's where we're
Yes.
dropping it.
Definitely.
And then title, and what was the other?
Content.
And I think we need to make sure that we've got this set up as enable reports.
Yeah, that'll do. You put a couple of entries in there and then make a grid based on that.
Ah, didn't add a button.
I did the same thing yesterday.
So this is a default submit. Yeah, we're good.
Yeah, so I'm remaking a fact module since DNN's fact module is it's not templatable like I want it to be, and I want to be able to move it this action form from website to website. So I kind of want to use the table that action form saves to without having to make my own table in CRUD.
Yep.
NAS.
So this is data sources action form from the
FAQ.
FAQ module, no filtering.
That's good.
This is, nope.
Title.
So it's not the ID.
It's not, no. While you're at it, you can make a special field for edit. Special.
So I'm sorry, this would be an add.
Well, go ahead and add your fields if you haven't already, but down below, you can add a special button on the item buttons, and edit item is the one.
It's Red Friday. You all know that.
And you're hoping for open and pop up?
Yes.
Everyone deployed. Although some people like, I got to stop the other day. It's just remembering our military. Some people are like, oh, well, you know, that's what we have these things. No. So many incredible men and women, military veterans who serve our country in so many different facets in so many different ways. So it's not just, oh, I'm gonna.
So now the question is, it's working, and you just wish that you could hide this form?
Yeah, I don't need the form there until it's called upon.
Also, have my we have a GoPro set up here in studio.
And
Picture. We're actually gonna do a whole video.
and you tried manual.
Yeah, you know, when we use the special button, yeah, go ahead and do that. It pops up something, but it's not usable.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so we've illustrated at least what the problem is. I'll try and find an answer to that. We'll circle back out with you as soon as I have it, and we'll close the loop on it next week as well.
Yeah, that's cool. I appreciate you looking at it. It's this could be a help question if you prefer to handle it there. That'd be great. I mean, that'd be fine. I would do that.
Great. Okay. Good hour. Thank you all for contributing, and special thanks to David for doing that. And we will we'll put all those links and stuff into the docket, into the recording, so that you'll be able to grab that stuff if you didn't grab it already. guess we'll see you guys next week, same hour. Let's do my closing tag here so I can make a nice end of a presentation. Have a good week.
Weekend, everybody.
Thank you. Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.